What did you do that immediately got you kicked out of a job? After graduating from grad school, I was having trouble finding jobs in my chosen career. I'd ended up applying to retail jobs just to get an income. I got hired at Old Navy. I went through training and even had 1 to 2 shifts. Then I got hired in my chosen career. Great! I went and told one of my managers, who was totally cool with it and understood, and even said I might be able to stay on part-time and help out during the holidays. Cool! Next shift, I have to tell the other manager that I got a new job. I just clocked in to start work, told this manager, and she tells me I can leave. I clock back out. I wasn't even allowed to work that shift. I barely knew her, but just from the short interactions I had with her, she seemed like a total jerk. I was 21. My first real full-time job was as an apprentice in an aircraft instrument repair shop. It was a small shop, just the owner, a bookkeeper, and myself. I loved it and was really enjoying working with my hands and being around the aircraft all the time. Just as we were closing up one day, the owner got a call. A customer needed an instrument. Did we have it and could we send it right away? We did have it, and since it was closing time, the owner told me to box up the part and label it. While I was doing that, he wrote a check to UPS and left the amount blank. He gave me the check and told me it was very important that the part get to UPS on time and to fill in the amount when I sent it. He also told me to be sure and bring back the receipt. The owner left me to lock up and take the package to UPS on the way home. I finished boxing up the part, locked up the shop. Yes, he trusted me with the key, and I took the package to the UPS. When I went to the counter, the guy weighed the package, printed out a ticket which he stuck on the box, and then pitched the box onto the belt. I watched the package disappear down the conveyor and reached into my pocket for the check the owner had given me. When I looked at the check, I realized that he'd put the date and made the check payable to the UPS, left the amount blank, but had also failed to sign the check. I didn't have enough cash on me to pay for the shipping. The box had already gone down the belt. The owner had stressed that this was a good customer and the part had to get there the next day. The check was already filled out to UPS, so I went ahead and wrote in the amount, $4.12. This was in 1977. I signed my boss's name on the check and handed it over to the guy behind the counter. He took the check. The package made it to the customer. The next day when I arrived at work, I immediately told my boss, the owner, what had happened. He fired me on the spot for signing his name to the check and watched me while I packed up my tools and left. One of my first jobs was working for this bucket telesales operation. We were selling long-distance plans, and they would change the fee structure and resell the same plan under a different name to the same customers. I went 1 week top of the sales chart, got a weekly bonus, and next week I was in the bottom numbers. This was the 2nd or 3rd week out of the training program as well. Ranking came out and they pulled me into the office and canned me for poor performance. I always thought it was because I walked in on them pulling names and numbers from different state phone books. They didn't have my final check ready that day. Next Monday, when I called in to make sure they had it, someone I didn't recognize answered but told me to come down for my check. It turns out they got raided for that whole scammy plan bit. I had a brief interview with an FBI agent, and they handed me my final check, and the place got closed down. Apparently, I missed out on a whole crazy entry scene when the feds came in the front and the back to grab the management team. I think you missed one of the more satisfying things it's possible to witness in life, and one that we all wish we could see. Seeing a crappy boss get cuffed and pushed out of the building into a waiting armored truck. The rest of us have to settle for dreaming that about our high school fast food jobs. I got fired from Borders because the person that was covering for me while I was on vacation got fired. What's even more messed up, I didn't even find out directly from them. Jose's girlfriend, she also worked there, texted me saying, "Hey, Jose got fired and you should probably call them because they've been expecting you." I called and the store manager was like, "Yeah, you're terminated. You can come in and pick up your last check." I didn't even bother arguing because I was going to give my 2 weeks notice when I got back anyway, because I was sick of their bullcrap. Joke's on them, they went out of business. As a backpacker in Australia around 2005 or 2006, I got a job working for a motivational speaker and life coach who was also a predatory fraudster. Basically, people would come to his free session on a Saturday and then, if they were interested, they'd leave their number for people like me to call them back and try to sell the paid weekend to them. Our script included things like how to advise people who said they couldn't afford it on how they could use their social welfare payments to pay for it. Really scummy. Anyway, on one call, a guy straight up asked me if this fellow was a fraud. And I said, "Between you and me, I think he is." Just as the supervisor walked past. She tapped me on the shoulder and whispered, "Make your last call," hung up and left. Really wish I could remember his name. Michael something. Scumbag. And we were in the main dressing room all week, but had to leave on the weekend because Alice Cooper was playing and needed the dressing room. We were moved to the hospitality suite near the stage, so we were trying to sell this bullcrap course with Alice Cooper blasting out in the background. Worked in a stockroom of a large, cheap clothing company. I was around 15 or 16. It was the most boring, mind-killing job involving moving boxes, unpacking boxes, unloading trucks, packaging boxes, and more boxes. It was mostly teenagers working to earn some pocket money. You try to make the shift go faster. I brought my MP3 player one day so I could listen to some music through headphones, but that wasn't allowed. So the intercom radio kept playing the same songs over and over. I think it was Scissor Sisters, I Don't Feel Like Dancing, and James Morrison, You Give Me Something. Anyways, one early Saturday morning shift I was working with a colleague my age. We had to unpack a load of carts with boxes. You know how kids are, we started messing around, throwing the boxes to each other like volleyballs. A manager came by and sent us to his office. We were told to leave and to not come back. That was actually a good day. I worked there for 3 months and I hated every second of it. Operations manager here. On the day of the Christmas dinner for the company, I texted one of the new employees who didn't show up at the restaurant we were having dinner at. This employee was with us for 2 months and was hired even after having bad reviews from previous employers, but still thought I'd give him a chance because we were in a pinch. His previous employer said he had issues getting to work or getting to work on time. He had no driver's license, so I asked one of the other employees with the company vehicle to pick him up in the morning, and sometimes he literally had to be woken up. Circling back to the day of the Christmas dinner, he replied saying that he'll need roughly a 38% raise from his current salary, otherwise he's quitting, because this other company offered him a job. I thanked him for his time with us and enjoyed the rest of my evening. A couple of months later, he called begging for his job back, and you all know what my answer was. One year, I was working at a summer camp. It was my first year, but a bunch of people had been going for years. This year, it was a brand new director, and she was useless. Regularly telling us she was too busy to do her job. Often told us that if she did the hiring, she would have gotten better employees. Told people that we can't get mad at kids and needed to use positive reinforcement. Then, when they got in trouble, just took them away and did nothing. Completely useless woman. There was one incident the day before this where one kid got 3 fingers like claws and scratched another while transitioning to the afternoon care, when the day staff were supposed to go to the office and plan activities for the next day. We were all inside when this happened, and so was the director who was actually supposed to be helping outside. Our director and regional manager came out the next day and gave written warnings to a bunch of people for being inside during our planning time. One of the 4 guys working at our camp, 37 employees and 4 were male, including me, stood up and said it was crap that we got written warnings for doing what we were told during training. But they didn't care, they wanted a scapegoat. He got angry and got fired on the spot for speaking up against our director, who was fired 3 weeks later for sucking at her job. In high school, my friend, whose nickname was the most common term for green herb we know, was scratching his package with his hand down the inside of his pants while flipping burgers at McDonald's. The owner stepped around the corner, saw him, and fired him in seconds. Are you telling me that's all it would have taken for me to get out of my fast food jobs? Oh, who am I kidding? That small-town food court restaurant would have had to actually catch me biblically desecrating the food before they'd go through the effort of finding a new staff member. Not me, but I witnessed it. Guy not only fired, but they had cops on site to escort him out. He was let go for a multitude of reasons. 1. Clocked in via phone, proceeds to show up 1 hour after his shift starts, and then leaves 1 hour early and clocks out via his phone again. 2. New access codes to vending machines, so he was stealing change out of them. Not all of it, but enough for discrepancies to be noticed. 3. Put paper towels on light bulbs in the bathroom. Stuffed paper towels down sink in break room so that he could be the hero who noticed the stuff prior to it causing a disaster. 4. General disrespect for his fellow employees. 5. Taking care of lax overtime policies and not actually working the overtime. This just happened. I was working for a small startup with an absolute C-word of a boss. He'd yell, demand 110% from his employees while he could barely afford to pay us. Paychecks were never on time, and he'd constantly demean me. He was an all-around misogynist. I talked back one time when he asked me, "How often are you on time to work?" and I responded, "How often do we get paid on time?" And the next day he texted me to bring my keycard and keys to work and fired me. Good riddance. I've never felt better. It seriously felt like I was released from prison. I saw someone get fired on the spot because he said he wanted to rage F a co-worker of ours. He was an idiot. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I got someone fired on the spot. As a kid, I went to the library on my bike and it got stolen. Months later, I saw it in the back of a friendly's near the employee parking. I called the police since I'd already filed a report with them. Easy to identify since it had some pretty unique features, like a custom valve cap I found once, and the handbrake on the left side didn't work. Police asked the manager if he knew who came in on the bike, and he said it was one of the cooks. They informed him it was stolen from me, so the manager called him over and berated him pretty badly while they put cuffs on him and promised to call all the other local restaurants so they wouldn't hire him either. Pretty sure he said, "I knew you were a fricking loser, but stealing a kid's bike? Really? You're 25, you prick." I think he ended up getting community service. I was already quitting. I put in my 30 days when working for an IT consulting firm, while I was allocated to work in a financial institution. I hated it there. I'd been there for 3 months, but I'd been working for the consulting firm for 1.5 years, and I got a much better offer to move up to project management, which was an amazing step for me. The financial institution was notified that I'd put in my 30 days during my lunch hour by the consulting firm. I was told I could leave when I came back from lunch. The consulting firm let me go as well, since they wouldn't need me for anything else just for those 30 days. Which was cool. I called my new boss and he told me I could start sooner if I wanted to. Took a 1-week vacation between jobs and then I started. I worked in a medical office, trying to be vague about the specialty, and the doctor was doing horrifically illegal things that were putting patients at risk for damages and disease. Things like having an unlicensed employee performing duties that they shouldn't be and not practicing proper hand washing or instrument sterilization, among other things. Not to mention the doctor was rude and would frequently yell at staff. During my employment, I brought attention to things that were being done and confronted the doctor in front of the rest of the staff. She fired me on the spot. I'd been keeping record of infractions as they were revealed and a lot of the more awful things that were hush-hush, and I turned them into the office of the Attorney General in my state. Just a few weeks ago, I found out that the doctor has been telling people that I was fired for trying to recruit people into a cult. I'm an atheist. My job had people come and go like it was a drive-through. We had one guy who was down that same path. He came in and started cutting the pizzas. I was helping him and he was a nice guy. Skip forward a couple of weeks and this guy is a master. Even during rush, he still has time to pick up orders. The manager comes in and asks him how he's liking his job. He says that he's glad he works there. Manager fires him on the spot. We get a new guy in and the cycle continues. I was working in a USPS priority shipping center during Christmas break from college back in 2002. It's fairly brutal work, tossing packages non-stop for an entire 8-hour shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I know, it's not a gulag or anything, but to a spoiled 20-year-old at the time, I recall hating it. So there's this massive conveyor belt structure that basically runs the entire length of this titanic warehouse. It's huge, kid, and they would store a ton of carts and other miscellaneous junk under there for storage. So naturally, I took to hiding out underneath it whenever the opportunity arrived. Pretty shifty thing to do, but alas, I was young and foolish. This went on for a good week when I decided to get bold and took to laying down inside a pushcart and covered myself up for what I'd hoped would be a brief nap. It's loud and a little cold, so I thought I'd be good. But nope. Slept for a good 4 hours only to awaken to a search party sent out to see if I'd died under the belt. The boss applauded my bold action but showed me the door all the same. Haha, pretty cool boss to actually credit you on getting out of your crappy job even as he gave you the boot. Sounds like he probably understood it wasn't a fun place to be. Not all antagonists are mean. At a place where I worked, people came to me saying someone was making creepy comments about my body, and they'd told HR about it, so when I got called in I said, well, yeah, that makes me uncomfortable, and the person got fired on the spot. It was a huge deal because everyone knew about it. I'd only been working there for a little less than a year, and they'd been there for over 10. Almost a decade ago, I was in my apprenticeship to become an electrical planner. I'm Swiss. Over here, your first apprenticeship is very important, and it's hard to get any job at all if you don't have at least one apprenticeship done. As a result, there was big pressure in my last year of school to get a place. Initially, I wanted to do computer technician, but I just couldn't land a hit, so I had to start looking into other jobs. Eventually, I landed a job as an aforementioned planner. Let's not mince words. Not only did I hate the actual work right away, I also hated my boss, and most of my co-workers. Initially, I just thought I would soldier my way through. Finishing your first apprenticeship is so important. I managed a little more than a year before I started to get depressed, to the point that my parents were starting to notice and my mother got on my case. I started missing work. I had a doctor that was very liberal in handing out a sick notice for 1 to 2 weeks straight. So I'd work for a month or so, miss like 10 days of work, and then work another month or so. My grades started to drop and I actually started to give my boss and co-workers lip for being so crappy to me. For context, I was a glorified maid. Every morning I had to take a 20-minute trip to the local bakery and get everyone their foodstuffs for the break. I frequently got shouted at if the stuff they wanted was already sold out. Well, why didn't you leave earlier? Because I'm already leaving almost an hour before the break actually starts. And then people would complain that the stuff wasn't warm anymore. Then twice a day I had to make coffee for everyone. They'd frequently change their mind on the order and then berate me for screwing stuff up. Often they'd complain even if I did exactly as they asked. You put too much sugar in. No, you just can't properly decide on how much you want. You asked for 3 and I put in 3. And probably the most offensive, I just couldn't do anything right. I was an apprentice. I earned maybe 1/10 of what the others made. And part of that deal is that you're allowed to screw up and then taught how to do it properly. No such luck, I was basically required to learn everything by myself or Google it, and then I'd get 60-minute sessions of beratement for not doing the work properly. The final straw was on a Friday. I had to leave around 4 p.m. at the latest so I could catch my train home. So I started cleaning everything at around 3 p.m. 5 minutes before I planned to leave, I just finished cleaning the office floor, whereafter one of my co-workers walks in wearing muddy and snowy shoes. It was February, I think, ruining the entire floor all over again. I packed my stuff. The boss came in and demanded I stay to clean up. I don't remember my exact words, but it was said very loudly and would probably get me banned from most places online if I put it in the story. When I came back on Monday, my boss told me to get out immediately. I remember laughing the whole way home. I was free. Probably one of the best days of my teenage life. Joke's on him anyway. I still had a bunch of stuff I was supposed to bring to the post office in my backpack. Held on to it for a few weeks in case they asked for it and then ritually burnt it in the hopes of some elder god smiting the office. It didn't happen, but it was satisfying nonetheless. Not me, but my co-worker at Subway got fired after giving her friend free food and paying for it immediately afterwards. Perfect. This just happened to me in September. I was a marketing manager at a fairly large digital advertising agency. I showed up to work on Wednesday at the same time I always did. Nothing out of the ordinary. My direct manager from the office up north was in for a strategy meeting. He and I sat down with my team and did some Q2 number reviews, goal setting, strategy for the remainder of 2018, talked about the pros and cons and how hopeful and optimistic he was. Then it was back to work as usual. About 2 hours later, he calls me into the conference room. I bring my laptop to take notes and figure we're going to go over more numbers or something. I look to my right at the end of the long conference room table, and the SVP of operations was sitting there, albeit with an uncomfortable, scared look on his face. They tell me to close the door. My manager said, "We've decided today is your last day." Didn't really give me any good reason why, but I found out it was a few days before earnings call and they'd missed their projected quarter numbers, and I was the most expensive employee on the team. I didn't push the crappy store credit cards enough. I was pulled off the till by a manager and he asked why I didn't try to sign the customer up for a card. He was watching us. I told them the customers don't want them, or should we push them? I'm sure if they want them, they'll ask. I was pulled into the office and fired or, quote, laid off because they didn't need extra staff, and that I was a problem child, as he worded it, because screw actual customer service and making sure the store doesn't look like a war zone. Look who's laughing now, Sears. This was 7 years ago. 6 months was way too long to work at a crap place like that. They destroyed themselves. I'm glad so many others have the same opinion. They preyed on people who didn't understand credit terms, who had bad credit, or were new to the country. How can you sign someone up so quickly for a crazy high-interest card and have a conscience? Daily, we had people coming to the register with bills not knowing what they were getting billed for, or totally confused by the card and getting angry by the high interest and card fees. I was told by management when I was fired that in 6 months I'd only signed up or did applications for 3 people, when it should have been closer to 1,300. Yes, 1,300. Even though so many of my shifts were before store hours doing price changes or cleaning, the store could look like a bomb went off and they'd rather push crappy cards. I got in trouble because I spent so much time helping customers and cleaning up the clothing. Yes, for things most stores require. My mum, brother and I were at Olive Garden about 20 years ago. We had the worst waiter in the history of the world. He was outrageously rude to the point of being downright mean to us. At the end of the dinner, my mum left him a dime for a tip, and as we were leaving, the waiter threw the dime at my mum. I was a little kid, otherwise I probably would have at least attempted to defend her. The waiter's boss saw the dime throw and fired the waiter on the spot. Everyone has a bad day, but that guy was just awful. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.